countryside badger vaccination.
Thank you. I run a badger vaccination scheme run entirely by volunteers in Devon called TB-Vac. Thank you, badgeristas, you're lovely. And I should be talking about badger vaccination right now and the 7 different reasons for why you should vaccinate badgers against bovine TB, but given what's happened at my local council this Thursday, where they decided to allow a badger cull on council-owned land, I am too vexed by what has happened to our democracy to discuss badger vaccination right now, but I'll be happy to in the marquee over there later, where TB-Vac has a stall. The vote in Devon was 3/5 in favour of a badger cull, and that's bearing in mind that we handed in a petition of over 6,000 signatures last month, which they completely ignored. And the first part of that petition, because there was 3 petitions handed in, the first one was set up by the council and was designed to fail. Now, 3/5 were in favour of a badger cull, and half of those councillors voting declared an interest in that they were members of the NFU or the Countryside Alliance. But nevertheless, they were allowed to vote. Whereas farmers have to declare an interest and they are not allowed to vote on countryside issues. But if you're a member of the Countryside Alliance or the NFU or even a hunt, you can declare an interest if you want to, but you can still get a full vote. I asked if the councillors who were members of hunts could also declare an interest. I asked that to the chairman and he didn't bother to reply. This government has failed rural communities and undermined democracy both locally and nationally. In the mid-1800s, wealthy landowners and aristocracy could control the votes of their tenant farmers by threatening to evict them if they didn't vote the way they wanted to. And they could tell that because back then you had open votes. Effectively, what they did is they gained power through the back door, circumventing the democratic process. They butchered 60,000 peaceful men and women who gathered at Peterloo Fields near Manchester, who were campaigning for universal suffrage and electoral reform, and they sent hired thugs on horseback, oh, doesn't that sound familiar, to hack men and women down and children, and it became known as the Peterloo Massacre. They expelled the Chartists that followed on from that early suffrage movement, and they deported them to Australia as traitors to the state for daring to demand better democracy and an end to such things as safe seats and open votes, as it happens. Now, some 150 years later, the same feudal attitude towards democracy is happening again. If it ever truly went away, that is. And it's most clear in the countryside and in rural politics. In 2013, we saw the NFU and Countryside Alliance controlling farmers in the badger cull zones, and they did that by threatening those farmers who would not take part in a badger cull with having their feed supplies terminated or their milk quotas cut. Now, or physical violence as well, actually, that too. Now, if any of those things happen to you and you're a farmer, that's curtains for your business. And what's worse is actually, even if you manage to stand up to that and you think, okay, once the cull started, I'm home and dry, and I don't have to take part, well, because we know that they didn't meet their figures, they carried on that pressure. So, some of those farmers were experiencing that kind of intimidation and threats for a good 9 months. The NFU and Countryside Alliance are not political parties, and we didn't vote for them. The people of the Forest of Dean decided they didn't want a badger cull, and the Forest of Dean District Council listened to their constituents and banned a badger cull on council-owned land. More than that, they didn't have the power to do more than that. But anyway, that was a good step. Among David Cameron's election promises were an end to top-down government. He promised devolved power to the regions. He promised more power to local governments. But he imposed a badger cull on the Forest of Dean anyway. He broke his election promises. There are large shooting estates at the centre of both the 2013 badger cull zones, and it is those large landowners who set the terms as to where the badger cull would take place. pressurising neighbours to take part, and it was not based on areas with high bovine TB. This government have broken their promises. Not only are they not the greenest government ever, but they have placed an environmental psychopath in the role of Environment Minister. His thinking is pure pre-Enlightenment superstition, spreading lies about badger ecology with no basis in science or in animal behaviour whatsoever. In the UK, we have no system to hold politicians to their electoral promises or to remove politicians who undermine the very departments they head. David Cameron is also not even holding to the coalition agreement he made to allow the electorate to remove incompetent or crooked MPs. Given his cabinet colleagues' choices, it's easy to see why. These are the real traitors to the state. They've given power through the back door to their hunting chums, to big estate landowners, to financial services dressed up as a national farmers' union, which is none of above, to large agribusinesses and to industrial farming. They've overridden the wishes of the electorate and imposed a badger cull on communities who made it plain they did not want it. They've not allowed a free vote in Parliament that is legally binding on this issue, only, appropriately, given their hunting obsession, a whipped one, and that's where the phrase comes from. They've imposed a civil war on rural communities who have done nothing wrong except that they happen to live near a large shooting estate. They don't even live in a TB hotspot. They have murdered a protected species against all scientific evidence, simply to get underhand votes from the ranks of the Countryside Alliance. The only measures to control bovine TB in cattle have been insisted upon by Europe, not by Westminster. In short, they have behaved exactly like a feudal landlord, in defiance of the democratic process. Welcome back to feudal Britain. For those with local elections this year, my challenge is to you. Find out which of your local councillors are in favour of a badger cull or who are members of a hunt. Let's face it, the two tend to go together. And name and shame them. Likewise, for the 2015 national elections, expose their vested interests as members of the NFU or Countryside Alliance, and as such will represent the interests of their own pressure groups instead of their electorate. Continue to press for better wildlife protection and environmental laws, such as local council animal welfare and environmental protection charters, such as the one implemented by Plymouth City Council. And if you look on their website, you'll see it. It's really nicely worded. And it actually prevents anyone in Plymouth from killing badgers, among other things. And if Venezuela and Tunisia can outlaw ecocide, why on this lovely earth can't we? And finally, on the grounds of the corruption of our democratic system, we need to demand the divorce of the NFU from the corridors of Westminster. So that the next government of whatever political colour cannot continue this abuse of power and the bastardising of our democracy. Thank you.